Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges. I'm one of your hosts today, Lauren Lake.
And I'm Aaron Schneider. Today we're joined by Dave Wethington with the Future Directions branch from Headquarters. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, everyone. Appreciate being here.
Dave, when I hear Future Directions, it kind of makes me think of like Star Trek or something like super cool. I'm just wondering, is that what you mean and what the Corps means by this, or what's really the mission of Future Directions branch?
Yeah. My wife joked when I took the job here the first time. She told me that I was too old to join a boy band. So Future Directions, while it does sound like something cool or futuristic or maybe a boy band, is actually the kind of a code name for the primarily congressional liaison arm of the Headquarters branch. So the Headquarters has its team called the Future Directions branch, and we do some congressional liaison, but we also do a number of other things besides that. And I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what else we do first and get back to the kind of civil works congressional liaison portion of it. In addition to that, we have a gentleman who works on military programs, congressional liaison, as well as having some points of contact with individuals who do the tribal affairs, as well as strategic integration in the Civil Works program, bringing in how does the Civil Works branch tie in with the Chief's campaign plan, for example. But as you mentioned, Aaron, primarily when folks think of Future Directions, they think of what we do with the Civil Works congressional liaison. And what's really important to remember is that we don't do congressional liaison for the entire Corps of Engineers. The Headquarters itself deals primarily with professional staff on congressional committees, so those who work on the appropriation side and on the authorization side. Now, we have a gigantic enterprise, over 34,000 individual civilians and contractors who work for the Corps of Engineers, about 38 districts that do civil works across the enterprise. So those 38 districts are really independently responsible for doing their own congressional affairs. You have commanders, you have senior civilians who spend a lot of time knowing the specific projects, knowing the relationships, and knowing the kind of political climate within the particular regions, whether in the Pacific Northwest or maybe in Florida. Your understanding of how all that works is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be different across the entire enterprise. Here at the Headquarters, we really centralize our relationships again with the authorizers and the appropriators. So myself and our small team of about 4 of us in total spend a lot of our time dealing with the annual appropriations process, helping the appropriators work through effects of legislation, looking at capabilities for certain programs or projects, and really helping provide information to those committees, to the committee staff, to be able to help craft their annual appropriations bills. On the other side, we also provide support to our authorizers in the production of the biennial WRDA bill. Every 2 years since 2014, we've had a Water Resources Development Act, a WRDA bill that our teams help support. And so we work with, not just within our branch, but we work across the Headquarters with legislative counsel, with subject matter experts in flood risk management and water supply, navigation, et cetera, to really help craft the legislation that you end up seeing. We provide legislative drafting services, and so we do a number of things that really helps really shape the future direction of the organization. That's kind of where the name of the branch has come from. We're a little bit more than just congressional affairs, and so that's why we've been given the kind of unique name of a future direction.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Thank you, Dave, for giving us that background. And you mentioned the WRDA bills. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, for our listeners who might not know, what WRDA bills mean to the Corps. And also, I know that there was a draft WRDA in 2020. Do we still expect that 2020 bill to get passed?
Sure. That's actually a great question. Here we are, coming up on December of 2020. And we're running out of a little bit of time, but still there's definitely time for a WRDA bill to get passed in 2020. Let me talk a little bit about that. Kind of taking it back to help the listeners out there who don't understand the function of a WRDA. Again, WRDA being an acronym, we all are acronyms, standing for the Water Resources Development Act. And what WRDA does is provide the Corps with a set of authorizations. Now, unlike our friends over on the military side, who may be familiar with the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, there's not specific appropriations tied with a core WRDA bill. Additionally, our authorities, unless deauthorized, will last forever. We still base certain authorities on the River and Harbors Act of 1910, and here we are in 2020. So what's really important about WRDA bills is that they provide for project authorizations. So those specific projects that you've done at the district level, your feasibility study, you've crafted a chief's report, or perhaps you've done a post-authorization change report where you need to increase the total authorized cost of that project. A WRDA bill will capture that information that the teams at the district levels have compiled to justify, the project specifically, or to identify, hey, this is why we need a specific cost increase, and send that information in a nice, tidy package to our authorizers, both in the House and Senate, and they will take those in and incorporate that information as part of the WRDA bill. A WRDA bill is also an opportunity for a member, a committee member, the chairperson, or anyone in the House or the Senate to really have an impact, to be able to influence the direction of the Corps. Something that we use in planning quite frequently, the 3x3 paradigm. 3 years, $3 million for a feasibility study, that has been codified within a WRDA bill. So there are a number of different things that will come through a WRDA to include more shaping the direction of policies of the Corps of Engineers, giving us specific authority to do water supply or other, continuing authorities programs, things like that, as well as specific project authorizations that allow us to grow our program, to build the important navigation, flood risk management, ecosystem restoration projects that we implement across the nation. So going back to the kind of state of play where we are in 2020, with regard to the WRDA bill, I think that there's been a lot of work on the existing bill. It started as early as October of 2019 on formulating bills in both the House and Senate. And we have bills that have been passed individually by the House and the Senate, and what they're doing right now is called conferencing. So the House and the Senate are looking at the differences within their bills and trying to find good negotiating positions on what they want to include and perhaps what their members are not as interested in including. So what's interesting in having the bifurcated Congress that we have now, where we have the Democrats in control of the majority in the House and the Republicans in control of the majority of the Senate, you have potentially some differing policy positions between the House and the Senate and where they are. But what's always been really fantastic about WRDAs as well as the Annual Appropriations Acts for the Corps of Engineers is that we are a bipartisan organization. Everyone can get behind infrastructure, can get behind reducing flood risk to your community. That's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's a people issue. And so we're very fortunate to be working within an organization that has such really strong support on a bipartisan basis from our elected officials.
Thanks, Dave. That's a really good point. I want to go back to, you talked about the WRDA bill and a little bit of how language can get in there, but I think the legislative drafting service is kind of a unique thing that the Corps does to work with, congressional members to get specific language in. But in addition to legislative drafting and the requests from Congress to help with, but what can a district do if they have an idea that they want to see get implemented in a WRDA bill or an authority?
Thanks, Eric. Those are really a couple good questions. Let's start with legislative drafting, and that is a very unique service that the Corps of Engineers does provide at the request of a member. And I think that's really important for all of our listeners to remember, is that a legislative drafting service is at the request of a member's office. It's not from a consultant. It's not from a general member of the public, and it's not something that comes in, hey, the Corps, we want to do something like that. We have to be very careful about, we don't lobby as an organization. We essentially do the bidding of our congressional members. So with legislative drafting, it can come up organically as a discussion about a specific project or an ability to do X, Y, or Z. And really it kind of stems from a member's office or a specific member wanting to be able to accomplish something for which the Corps does not have an existing authority. So requests for legislative drafting can come in at the district level. and often they do, and we highly encourage that in your engagements at the district level with members of Congress and their staff. And so when I say it has to come in from a member's office, that does include, a member's staff. You don't have to get on the phone with your local elected official to necessarily request legislative drafting, although that may be fun. Working with a member of their staff is equally, it suffices. And so that legislative drafting will come in. It's really important to make sure that it travels up through the vertical team, through your division office, up into the headquarters, usually through the regional integration teams for each division, and then comes through the Future Directions branch and Legislative Council. And so that is our role within the organization, is to make sure that the legislative drafting, the request for legislative drafting does come through Legislative Council and is seen by the right folks at the headquarters level. And because, very honestly, you could draft the best piece of legislation at the district level. It could work exactly the way the member wants it to work, and you will get zero credit. But trust me, the moment that you draft a piece of legislation and it gets enacted and it doesn't have the effect that that member wants it to have, you will get all the recognition which you do not want. And so that's why we're here to help kind of prevent that from happening, because you at the district level, and I've been there myself, do not want that recognition when that piece of drafting service does not have the intended effect. We'll take a look at it from the headquarters perspective, make sure that the right policy folks, technical subject matter experts take a look at it, and make sure through our legislative council that it has the exact effect that the member is seeking, and we can explain very clearly what those effects are. And oftentimes, if the request for legislative drafting comes up from the district up to the headquarters, we will very happily send the finalized package as well as any kind of effect statement back down to that division or district office, because again, it's my personal belief that the relationships are best kept at the district level. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, as we were talking, I mean, the knowledge of the projects, the knowledge of the relationships, the knowledge of the kind of political climate is really unique at the district level. And while here at the headquarters, obviously, we want to help, with policy oversight and make sure that there's consistency in the way that the program is being implemented across the enterprise. It's not my particular desire to have that relationship with 535 members of Congress across the organization. We just don't have that kind of bandwidth up here. So really, for legislative drafting, we'll send those LDS requests back down, and you at the district level can take that piece of information and call up your member and their staff and transmit the information and help work through it. And we stand ready here at the headquarters to be able to help. That's something that you all are interested in. To kind of get to the second question, and I think I hit on it a little bit with regard to, hey, if there's a good idea, if there's something that's missing, what's really important is that we don't appear like we're lobbying. A lot of times we'll get very passionate. I spent over a dozen years at a district office myself. I've been very passionate about projects, working as an engineer, working as a project manager, working as a larger program manager, and, have a lot of good ideas. And very honestly, if there is something out there that we see as a good idea, working with a non-federal sponsor, working, in kind of having general discussions with project stakeholders, that's really the best way to get to members of Congress. It really should not be the Corps of Engineers calling up our members, our specific congressional representatives as an agency and saying, hey, the Corps really needs this. That can kind of appear as a conflict of interest, kind of appear as we're lobbying for something specifically. And we do see that every once in a while. And, it's going to happen. I'm sure that folks will have ideas, but really working through your non-federal sponsors on a project issue and something that needs to get solved is probably the best way, because then, your non-federal sponsor can reach out to their, to the member of Congress and have that conversation organically, where then the member's office can call the Corps and say, hey, I've been talking to this non-federal sponsor. They've identified this particular issue. Can you help me as a member of Congress come up with the best way to address this particular issue, this, issue we're having with regard to the authority to implement a project, or we really think that the Corps is missing a program to look at resiliency in the Great Lakes, for example, and what can you offer to help with that? And then at that point in time, it's very much the member has organically come to the Corps and we can certainly help with that.
Great. Thank you for those details, Dave. I really do see how it could be difficult for you to manage at your level all those relationships with congressional members. So I do think you're stressing that it's important that the districts maintain those relationships, and you're there to help as needed is great. I do wonder, obviously, communication is a key component of what you do. And having so many districts out there and so many congressional members, what are some of the challenges that you face in communicating effectively with all these entities out there?
I think one of the greatest challenges that we face is the kind of lack of predictability or getting to really kind of be in a reactive environment. So that's something that we've really tried to transform and revolutionize as much as we can, is trying to shift from a reactive mindset to a proactive. And I mean, there are a number of things that we can do, but I think number one is communicating regularly. Regularly checking in with your staffers at the district level for the projects that those members are interested in. And that wraps all the way up to the headquarters level where, it's up to myself and my team to check in regularly with our appropriation staff or authorization staff on certain issues, on certain topics that are of particular interest, because they start to get worried when they haven't heard from you in a while. And so I think the greatest way, the best way to get away from a more reactive environment is to be proactive in our communications. Members of Congress hate to read about things in the media that we could have told them in advance. That is by far the greatest sin, is to read something in the front pages where, the Corps did X, Y, or Z, and the member or the committee staffer had no clue that the Corps was going to come out with this position. There's absolutely no excuse for that. And I mean, that's dead stop right there. There are legislative liaisons across the organization. Every district has somebody who is responsible for, picking up the phone and engaging with the members' staff, with the members' offices. And I think that there's been traditionally, because it's so decentralized, because we have 38 different districts that do civil works programs, and 8 different regional subordinate commands, 8 different MSCs. It is decentralized, and I think there's a little bit of a lack of consistency. And I think that's something that, without saying, hey, we're headquarters and we're here to help, I think that there's a few things that we could do as an organization to really start to maybe kind of pull more cohesiveness into the information that legislative liaisons have to work with. And I think that's something that we probably owe the headquarters level as an enterprise, and work with our divisions and to work with the districts to maybe help centralize, some best practices, some training materials, maybe some kind of a regular, whether it be a quarterly or semi-annual type of a get-together where, myself and my team can engage with a number of the congressional liaisons to kind of share, here, this is what's going on, this is what we see happening at the enterprise level, and are there any questions from the districts, from the divisions. And that's something we don't have right now that I'm very interested in implementing. To all the listeners out there, if you see something coming out the next 3, 6, 9 months, that's what Weddington's talking about. Is we're looking to really try and put together some kind of a community. Again, it doesn't have to be a formal community of practice. Some kind of a network where we can connect all the legislative liaisons, because what we do is very unique and it's very important to the organization. And so I'm very passionate about it, and think that we may be doing a disservice to our districts by not having some kind of a centralized network and some kind of a forum where we can share best practices, share training materials, et cetera. So that's something I'm really excited about, and I think will hopefully help the revolution, help move things and become more efficient within the organization.
Yeah, Dave, I really like when you talk about being a reactive organization versus proactive. And the reality is, one of my, top 10 fears is to get an email from Dave Weddington at, 4:59 on a Friday, because, it's like, oh, it's an emergency. Like, I got to get this thing to somebody, 20 minutes ago. And, but the reality is a lot of the information that we get requested at the district level in these forms of data calls and last minute things are things that we really should have readily available for you already. And so talking about best practices and looking for ways to share information better, are you looking at any initiatives to really consolidate and streamline how we provide information both to the public and to congressional members that it's just common sense that should be out there so we can avoid some of these last-second data calls?
Sure, Aaron. You're absolutely right. I mean, and while I would love to tell everyone out there today that, we could get to a state where you're not going to get those emails from Weddington or somebody on my team at 4:59 on a Friday. I wish we could get there. I don't think just because of the very nature of working with Congress, working with members, that we're going to get away from that. However, I think we can certainly reduce the amount of times that happen. And to your point, Aaron, to be able to have information readily consolidated, centralized, and ready to go. I mean, every project should have some kind of a standard fact sheet. We've been doing this long enough that there shouldn't be an issue with, being able to get information like what's the benefit cost share ratio, who's the non-federal sponsor, what is, what's the cost share, and what's the balance to complete, when's it going to be complete, when's the PPA going to be signed, et cetera. Any number of issues that we could ask for on a regular basis, that should all be consolidated. And I think it makes sense that the information we would share potentially with members of Congress and the public would be the same. In general, like you said, Aaron, there should be some consolidation of information and have all that be readily available.
Yeah, thanks. So we've talked a little bit about two initiatives, I guess, a loose community of practice, maybe consolidation of information to help with data calls. What other initiatives do you have ongoing in your office?
I think in addition to that, one thing that we would like to really kind of emphasize and get a better grasp on is congressional engagements. And because there are so many engagements that happen across the organization, at least once, if not a couple times a year, it's our responsibility, it's my team's responsibility to prep our chief of engineers and usually the Secretary of the Army for Civil Works for budget testimony. And a lot of the engagements that we see at the district level with members are the information that is exchanged there is very valuable up at the headquarters level, at those senior leadership levels. I mean, so for example, when out in California you have a member who's engaging on a specific project and, 2 weeks before we go into the testimony prep, the district commander is out there having an office call with that member, it would be great to know what was the information that was prepped to talk about and what were the actual results of that discussion. And I think as an organization, we do two things very regularly. We prep our senior leaders for engagements like this, and we create some kind of and I'll use the military term, XM. We create some kind of a summary, a notes, an after action, whatever it is. But those two pieces of information, I would wager, my last paycheck, that anytime you have a senior leader, whether it be your district commander, your district DPM, your MSC commander, my boss, General Graham, I'm going to be doing a read ahead of some kind, so prepping information for him, and then I'm going to do some kind of a summary of the engagement, whether it's a 5-line email or a formal XM, if you will. We'll have some kind of documentation. And I think what will be really valuable to the organization is to have some way to standardize not what those products look like, but a standardized repository where those products could be accessed by anyone across the organization.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave, particularly in how we help improve our partnerships. Software like that could really do a lot to help us engage with our partners and ensure that we're communicating the right information to folks and communicating with them effectively and efficiently from also inside the core perspective.
I think you bring up an excellent point, is that this is not just helpful just to the headquarters. It's not, again, we're headquarters, we're here to help. It's helpful to your district. It's helpful at your district level, the district commander, the senior leadership there, because they know the last time they engaged with this member, if there's a change in senior leadership, there's a change in command, all that information is right there. And it's really empowering the districts to help even better their communication processes and their engagement with the members. Just have that at your fingertips look at, hey, this is the last time we met with our, our member. This is the project they discussed. Oh, they asked me about this particular permit issue. Totally forgot about that, but I can really impress them and be like, hey, last time we had this discussion, you asked about this permit issue. This is what's going on here. And so this is a tool that I think that while, some folks may see it as, the headquarters wanting to know more information being in our business, that's not it. It's really how do we embrace and, improve upon our relationships with our members and other stakeholders. I think this kind of platform could be used with, your partners and, the dredging association folks or whomever a district engages with on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And I think that this is something that our organization needs. So glad to hear that you're looking into it. And I think we have a few other folks out there who would definitely agree with this approach and help move this along as well. And so, improving partnerships is a strategic area of focus for the Civil Works Directorate. And I'm just wondering, now that we're in this COVID environment and a more virtual environment, how have you been maintaining partnerships and improving your partnersons?
I think that very honestly, I probably talk to some of my committee staffers more now than I did in this pre-kind of COVID environment, this pre-telework environment. I think we've done a great job as an organization leveraging technology. There were obviously hiccups the first couple of weeks with VPN, trying to figure out what platform everybody's comfortable with, whether it's MS Teams or WebEx or Skype. All those kind of growing pains will be there. My wife and her colleagues all use Zoom, and we don't even use Zoom as an organization. So, there's always going to be some little things there. But in terms of working virtually, this has been one heck of an experiment. I mean, it's certainly unfortunate everything that's going on. Our kids will be talking about how they grew up in the pandemic, and their mom and dad would tell stories about how they traveled uphill in the snow for 10 miles each direction during the pandemic. And it's going to be certainly hopefully something that we can kind of look back on and learn from. And I think as an organization, we will have really looked at how we can work more effectively in a virtual environment. Working in congressional relations is a little bit unique because we have members on Capitol Hill, and politics, by its very nature, it's an in-person game. You go out, you shake hands, you campaign, you sometimes maybe you hold rallies, I don't know. And that's how politics has traditionally been done, is an in-person, shaking hands, kissing babies sort of realm. And so I don't think we'll get away from that completely. I still think that there will be value, and there will be value seen in having senior leaders make Hill visits. This is a huge thing that the organization has done in the past. Is it something that we need to do 2 times a year? Does everybody need to come up and do it? I don't know if that's the case. Is there maybe a better use of time and energy to have virtual calls and do that? And I think that as a community, as a nation, we're all a little more comfortable with using virtual platforms.
Thanks, Dave. So we've been talking a lot about, really, we basically give you a whole bunch of softball questions here, but you opened the door here with, shaking hands and kissing babies. So I really want to find out where are all these political skeletons out there buried, and what you want to tell us about that.
There are not a whole lot of political skeletons out there. We've got fantastic relationships with our committee staff. And I think that's been a really great thing working in this job. I came in prior to being the chief of the branch. I had an opportunity to work for about 4 or 5 years under the previous chief, and really developed a lot of solid relationships. And that's what this is all about. Is whether you're working in congressional relations, you're working as a project manager, you're working within a project delivery team, it's about the relationships you build with your colleagues and understanding how to kind of work toward that mutual end goal.
Well, if I was a better podcast host here, I'd probably push you a little bit more on those skeletons, but maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the opportunities out there. I think every year you send out a note to folks saying, hey, great opportunities on the Hill. For those opportunities, what specifically are you looking for? What type of people? And really what benefits does that provide to the agency?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. there are opportunities that come up sometimes more regularly than others. I don't know if we have one necessarily every year. It seems to have been that way over the past several years, so hopefully we can kind of keep a good thing going. But there are often opportunities to work either on the authorizations or the appropriation side, and depending on who is looking for that particular amount of help. And it's not something that we have as a standing rotation. The committee staff will come to us, say, hey, we really need help because we're in the middle of cracking the word, or we really need help because we're in the middle of putting together a Pope's bill and our staffer resigned, who specializes in water issues, and so we need someone from the Corps to really help with that. And so depending on who it is that's looking for somebody from the Corps, there's a wide variety of experience that is really probably well suited to do these details. I think on the authorization side, we just had a detail announcement go out. I think that might be what you're referencing, is that, the committee staff was looking specifically for someone who had some kind of experience at the headquarters or MSC level. That was an ask from the staff, not a kind of an imposed restriction by anybody here, myself, or anyone else. So that was something that the member, when they asked for some assistance, they included in their letter. And again, that particular case, and I'll just speak specifically to that, is on an authorizations committee, and so to help in either putting together or helping with oversight of implementation of a Water Resources Development Act, or WRDA. And so a lot of the skill set that comes with that is a breadth of Corps experience. If you've been very specialized in one particular area within the Corps, perhaps you may not be as well qualified as someone else who's done a number of different things. That said, it's an excellent opportunity to get exposure to how we get our authorities, how we get appropriations on an annual basis, and I think it's really it's very valuable to the kind of self-individual development of the person who gets selected as a detailee, as well as the information they can bring back to their district, to their organization.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, and I think that's a really great opportunity for folks out there to learn a lot, and hopefully, when we're not in this COVID environment, folks will be even more willing to take on that opportunity. I think we're about at the end of our time for today, so wanted to see if you had any last thoughts or any topics we didn't touch on before we wrap up.
No, thanks a lot for everyone's time, and I really appreciate anyone who's kind of made it through this entire podcast. Thanks for listening. I really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of share some knowledge with you guys today. We'd be happy to come back if you have an interest in the future. And if any folks out there in the organization have specific questions for myself or my team, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. The only caveat I'll give is that if you're looking me up on the global list, I am David M. as in Michael Weddington. With that, thanks again for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. Really enjoyed it, and would love to come back sometime.
Thanks, Dave. And thank you for joining us today for this edition of Inside the Castle. We appreciate you and your insights on future directions. To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What topics are important to you and people you're interested in hearing from. Until next time, be safe, be innovative, and be revolutionary.
To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.